I think it's going to be a roller coaster, but I think it's going to be one of the most exhilarating, fun rides I've probably ever been on starting this journey.
I think there's this myth of perfection for officials, and the reality is sometimes bad calls are made. Some of that is the contribution of parents in care provider setting an awful example and or not holding their students accountable.
You're now tuned into the BeOfficial Movement.
Check this out. Join the BeOfficial Movement.
Join the BeOfficial Movement.
Welcome back, YouTube and WIDR Kalamazoo. I'm here with a special guest named Dr. Adam Wall. How are you doing, Adam?
I'm doing very well. Honored to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Anytime. Thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure.
I wanted to bring you in and get a wider view on officiating and what it means to you and why it's so important to not only the local community here but for the nation. So, Adam, could you give our fans and viewers some context about, your position here at WMU and a small little background?
Happy to. I am currently the Assistant Director of Compliance at Institutional Equity, and our office oversees Title IX, ADA compliance, EEO and affirmative action, and any protected class discrimination. So I've been in that position for about 8 months now.
Okay.
Thoroughly enjoying it.
I'm glad. Awesome. Well, thanks for putting in all that hard work for our university.
Absolutely.
Let's get right into it. So off the air, we kind of talked about, what BeOfficial is and the purpose of it and where I see it going and where you think it could go. For me, starting the startup, I really think that this issue of the shortage of referees is not only happening here in my local community in the state of Michigan, but I do think it's happening across the nation through the research that I've done, through the MHSA, the different state associations, and NASO. I see the numbers decreasing every year within the last decade. And you did a little bit of research on your own before the interview. So,
yes.
Did you see the same things or what?
No, you're spot on. Absolutely. I would characterize it as alarming.
Mm-hmm.
All of the data suggests that, especially during the past 10 years, the number of officials, the number of referees,
closer to the mic, like you can adjust,
continued to decline.
There we go.
And that's statewide, but it's also across the country.
Okay.
And so I think you're really tapping into something that is incredibly important and will have some longevity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really foundational to hopefully revitalizing a profession that is seeing some very troubling times. So all the things that you just said, not only the numbers of officials, there has to be a pipeline to get people engaged and to stay there, the retention.
I agree with you, and I think you said it best, like a pipeline and profession as well. A lot of people don't know that officiating is a profession that is pursuable or is on the table. When I talk to either high school kids or college students or even some adults know that it's there, but they're just not really that interested in it. But high school students and college students, they don't even really think about it at all. They don't really know that it exists for them. When they see referees, they think that you have to be older to be a referee. That's not the case. And they also think there's a lot of backlash that comes with it, with crazy parents and angry fans.
Sure.
But for me, in my experience as being a referee, I've got some crazy parents here and there for some of the games I've worked, but
for the course.
Right. But when I look at my overall career in officiating, it's like slim to none, especially if you have a solid crew working with you and you guys are handling the game appropriately. it doesn't really happen. I think the only time that happens is when the game gets out of hand, and a lot of times that kind of falls on the officials who were working that game. You're supposed to control the game and make sure everything's played fairly and everybody's under control. And if you let it get out of hand, those are the types of situations you kind of put yourself into.
Well, I think it's complex. We can't place solely that job on the officials. There's definitely been there's been a lot that talks about the experience of officials, and it differs depending on the level. I left that out for sure. But you hit on a few things there, so I'm going to try to unpack some of what you shared, and we can keep this going. One of the things you mentioned was the visibility. People being able to see officials as professionals, seeing officiating as a profession. And I think part of that declining number, one, we have less people who are entering that profession, so that may be a contributor. I think anytime that a child, a student, anyone can see someone that they can relate to, someone who looks like them, someone that they can relate to, it increases the likelihood that they will take an interest or be engaged or even be curious about what it is that person is doing.
Right.
And so to your point, I think at every level, and this is why it's so important, having models, having role models, officials as role models, people who can relate to the athletes on the field, the coaches, the parents, all that's important. And when that happens at different levels, I think peer-to-peer is arguably the most powerful of all those.
Okay.
So here at the college level, whether it's recreation, club sport, anything that requires officiating, it's an opportunity. I know that my friend is an official for these sports, or they're an official with MHSAA or so on and so forth. It's those individual relationships and those individual conversations, I think, that help really facilitate forward progress with people's understanding that, hey, this is actually a thing. It's a profession.
Right.
It requires training. It's something that can develop skill, and it can pay you.
It can pay you. It definitely can pay you.
And so, there may be a negative stigma right now. I think people really remember the positives. To your point about your experience at officiating, the overwhelming majority of your experiences have been positive. People don't remember that. I think they're going to remember the time where the official was booed by everybody and harassed or heckled, and that is not what happens the overwhelming majority of the time.
Correct.
I don't want to diminish that as an issue. It definitely is, again, depending on the level at which one is officiating. I think there's more of a likelihood that can happen, but I think that fits into even yet a broader conversation about civility in athletics and sports.
Civility in sports, give some more context on that.
Really what I'm talking about, just the general nature in which people engage, every stakeholder engages during an athletic contest.
Okay.
And it can also be practice, I suppose, but when we're talking about contests, games, matches, meets, so on, the atmosphere of sportsmanship, of conduct, not just by the athletes, but by the coaches, and even more importantly, by the parents. And again, this has different implications at different levels, but at the collegiate level, at the level that you're primarily focused on right now in terms of young students and high school students, parents have to behave.
Correct.
Parents also have a job to do in terms of modeling acceptable behavior, sportsmanship, just things that athletics can help teach if they're not already in place. But the hope is some of those fundamentals that I guess we take for granted now are not in place, and I think some of that is the contribution of parents, in care provider setting, an awful example and or not holding their students accountable. The coaches can't do it all.
You're right, and the refs
do it
can't
all.
either.
Yeah, so it's a shared. Everybody has a responsibility in facilitating and promoting a culture, an atmosphere, an athletic environment whereby we treat people with respect. I mean, it sounds so fundamental, but clearly, it can be an issue.
I got some ideas on how to promote a more positive atmosphere within sporting events, particularly like the high school and below. You mentioned earlier officials can't do it all, and I totally agree with that. Coaches, they set in practice, that's when they need to be kind of setting a standard, because they scrimmage against each other and the coach is like the mock ref for their practice. And so when their players complain to them about whatever the coach called, it's important for them to put emphasis on, like, don't worry about what I called. You can't worry about what the official called or whatnot. Just kind of turning that energy as if the call was whatever call was made, react to it and get back to the next play. When it comes to the parents, I feel like they kind of get caught up in the moment with their, son, daughter, or child.
Sure, we all do to some degree, sure.
And I feel like it's important for them to recognize, especially at the lower levels, your child is not in the NBA or NFL yet. So your emotions, you got to find a way to kind of control them. Root for your child for sure, but if a call is made against your child, like, that's the sport. A call is made against every other parent's child in that gymnasium or field or wherever the game is being played.
Sure.
And don't be that odd parent out who's making a scene and kind of ruining the environment for the rest of the viewers. I think some responsibility for that falls on the school or setting that the event is taking place. So the organizers of these AAU tournaments, you provide the culture for the whole gymnasium and the tournament itself. If you set the standard that, you can't be getting all rowdy or whatnot, especially towards the officials, then your tournament probably will go a lot smoother and you'll have less outcomes or negative outcomes. For high school sports, the ADs and the staff on site, they have that same responsibility. They can start, communicating with the fans who are getting too rowdy or whatnot, removing them if need be, and really facilitating a more positive culture. And the more I think that happens, the more that parents will shift, and then their children growing up see that their parents have calmed down, and maybe they look at things differently. It's going to have a snowball effect, in my opinion.
So, yeah, we hope that. We would hope.
In my opinion.
Yes, no, we would hope that. Everyone, we all, those of us who are fond of athletics, of sports activities, there's typically passion around that. If there's someone that we know who is on our team, then there's a natural inclination to be very enthusiastic, supportive for that individual or those individuals. And that's all good. We all have that. I think the other thing that you said, I think there's this myth of perfection for officials. And the reality is sometimes bad calls are made, but that's just like any other profession, where people make mistakes. Depending on the sport and the technology available, sometimes there's the ability to correct that, other times not. But at the end of the day, to what end? Where is this going to get me? If I act a fool in the stands and then that doesn't make me look good, doesn't make my child look good, so I think there's a long way to go, and it's a really complex issue in terms of whose responsibility it is to manage behavior, and at what level. But, I think you do have to continue to manage it and start somewhere. And if officiating can be one path to help educate, help try to facilitate, then by all means, have that be, a part of that training and outreach.
And that's why I kind of wanted to elaborate on that. All the different things I spoke about, they talked about different areas of who's communicating with who to calm that audience down. We got all ADs and things talking to the parents. We got officials talking to the players on court or field. We got coaches talking to the players. To your point, it's just whose responsibility is it to level out the playing field for the culture and whatnot. It has to come from multiple angles. It can't just come from the referees. It can't just come from the parents. It can't just come from the coaches. It's got to come from all over the place. We have to unite, and that's something that hopefully through the BeOfficial movement and whatnot, and putting this word out there, like for sporting events in general, all of us have to unite together to make our sporting events just more fun, less, I don't know if I want to say dangerous, but some things can get out of hand if not handled properly, and so we don't want that. We want the games to be safe and everybody to have an enjoyable time.
Yes.
So let's move on to like our next subject. We kind of talked about the diversity in the workplace for officiating. So we spoke off air about you seeing an average age of officials about 44, and then me seeing an average age of officials for about 55. It's a 10-year difference. What are some things that you see in that age difference?
Yeah, well, to my earlier point, with being able to see somebody that I can relate with, seeing someone that looks like me, that's always important. And officiating is no exception in terms of the disproportionate number as far as race and gender, in terms of the demographic of officials, predominantly white, predominantly male, and I don't have the numbers in terms of athletes. That's probably be a challenging number to get, depending on state, sport, and so on. But the bottom line is there's work to be done with diversifying the officiating demographic in the state and in the country. And I think that will always be important. When the high school person sees their 45-year-old officials, it's hard. I mean, that's like mom, dad, or whoever. Whereas if it's someone that is their age, slightly older, college age, I think there can be, and it's not to say that older officials can't establish positive relationships, so on and so forth, but I think there is a greater likelihood that a student will see themselves in a person who is more closer in age and demographic features as they are. And so I think it speaks to the need to actively continue to try to expose people to officiating and what the profession is, and broaden their perspective with what this actually looks like.
Right.
And the tremendous number of options that they actually have in terms of how they can make a living doing so.
Yeah, and we spoke about, this is a profession that, not many people of the younger ages really know about, and I think that's something that here at BeOfficial, I really want to, bridge that gap. So you spoke on the 45-year-old officials. My eyes, yeah, you're right. When I was in high school, that's like mom and dad age or guardian age. But if it was, I think just to add to your point, I feel like me seeing that lets me know, just even without any communication to them, that that's something that I could be in the next 3 years.
Yes.
Versus seeing my mom or dad, and that's something I could be when I get my mom and dad's age, you know, and when they're thinking about their future in high school, they're not. When they see that, they think like, okay, well, I don't want to be a referee. If that's all they do, like I don't want to do that. I want to be a doctor or want to go to the pros. Like they're thinking more broad and bigger things, but they don't see it as like a practical thing for them in the next 3 years. That's why that communication barrier is so like large right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a hard disconnect to try to bridge for sure. And you know, even if people don't make a career out of it,
right,
then it's good supplemental income.
Oh, for sure.
And you know, the economy is doing really well. People aren't trying to find as many jobs because people have them. But I think to your point, when I worked in student affairs, all the people who are seeking on-campus employment, and all these different academic and non-academic and service areas, I rarely see or hear about officiating as a possibility. So I think it again speaks to perhaps marketing and education about the very broad scope of the profession.
Right.
So no, this can be a part-time thing for you.
Right.
It could be a part-time thing for you even when you're your parents' age.
Right.
It's one more possibility among many that people can pursue to help develop themselves, to develop skills outside the classroom that can potentially have really long-lasting effects and lifelong lessons, just the same as athletics does.
And some of my past videos, I talk about how officiating can help you build like your leadership and networking skills, even personal fitness as well.
Absolutely.
So I think, like you said, marketing, getting the word out there, making it known that this is an opportunity for people, and there is a large need for it right now. So anybody who is listening to this or will watch the video in the future, there's a significant shortage, and we will always, at least at this point, be accepting people to become referees or training them up, because referees, like you said, for some people it's a part-time thing, for other people it's a career thing. So people are constantly going to come and go on different age groups at different levels and different sports. We kind of talked about off air, it's not just limited to like basketball, football, soccer, and volleyball. We got swimming, cross country, track, wrestling, hockey,
gymnastics, cheer,
lacrosse, all these different sports and avenues that just kind of go unheard of. So I really want to bridge that gap with this movement, and I appreciate you here coming on the show. Do you have any
pleasure.
Closing remarks that you want our audience or listeners to hear?
Well, I'm really proud of you. And,
thank you. I appreciate it.
And I'm excited for you. I mean, it's a wonderful vision that is based on your own experience, your own path, and your own goals and aspirations. And it's obviously needed. And so to help be supportive with a group and an organization like this, as you're really building from the ground up, is humbling, and I'm happy to be here. I think BeOfficial has tremendous potential, and so I hope that you'll continue to do this. I hope that you'll continue to educate people and provide opportunities for people to learn more about officiating, for you to share your own testimony about what your experience has been, and to continue to bridge your network of professionals and others to help get you to where you want to go. Off here, we talked a little bit about your long-term global goals, and that's wonderful, and I want you to keep holding on to that. But I also be patient in the iteration by impacting the people who are closest to you will do much good. So those local networks and community development, you have to start somewhere, and I think you're starting in a very, very receptive place. So that's all. I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see the work that you're going to continue to do in this area.
Yeah.
And I'm sure to the benefit of a lot of people.
Well,
so keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Adam, man. I appreciate that a lot. That means a lot. And you're right. I'm going to do my best. I'm not going to do my best. I'm going to keep, trying to educate full throttle. And I know you do have to start somewhere. So that's why I want to start here. When I talk to other, people like yourself, and they're just like, appreciate the process. You got to take it day by day, step by step.
Right.
As long as I can impact, if I can impact one person, then that person can impact somebody else, and then it kind of grows from there. So, I follow you. I appreciate you supporting this company, this show, this myself, and it is going to be. I think it's going to be a roller coaster, but I think it's going to be one of the most exhilarating, fun rides I've probably ever been on starting this journey. So.
And I suspect you're 100% correct.
All right, Adam. Well, thank you for being on the show. Again, you're listening to the BeOfficial Movement on WIDR Kalamazoo. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BeOfficialMVMT. Our website will be launching soon, so stay on the lookout for that. And thanks again, Adam.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Awesome.
You're now tuned into the BeOfficial Movement.
Check this out. Join the BeOfficial Movement.
Join the BeOfficial Movement.